Hi everyone, in this video we're going to discuss shipping details that you should not overlook. Sometimes people run into problems with their shipments if they don't pay attention to the small details that go into the paperwork, that go into the filing. It can end up costing them extra money. These mistakes should not happen if you're working with a good broker, but it's important to know some of these details to know what questions to ask and to know what to look out for. So first, you want to make sure that your HS code is accurate. So what's an HS code? HS or HTS stands for Harmonized Tariff Schedule, and it's an international system for classifying goods. If you misclassify your goods numerous times, you're going to start to owe penalties on that. Classifying goods can actually be pretty complicated, depending on what it's made out of, how many different types of parts it has. In a lot of cases, you're going to want to consult with an expert about that. So in most cases, your supplier will include the HS code on your commercial invoice, but you also want to get confirmation from your broker that your goods have been classified correctly. On that note, it's also very important to provide all of the details of your goods to your broker so that they can confirm the HS code. Here's another detail you want to take into account: anti-dumping and countervailing duties. Anti-dumping and countervailing duties apply to imported products that are considered to be unfairly subsidized or priced below fair market value. This is a tariff that essentially levels the playing field to protect local industry. So you're going to want to find out in advance if your goods are subject to these. One thing to keep in mind is that anti-dumping rules change from time to time, so make sure to ask your broker about it. Make sure to ask your broker if your goods are subject to any of these. Another detail: PGA compliance, or partner government agency compliance. Sometimes your goods will require compliances from regulatory bodies like the FDA. So if you're shipping anything related to food, if you're shipping cosmetics, make sure that your goods are in compliance with everything that they need to be. Work with your customs broker to see if your goods are subject to any of these compliances, and make sure your supplier has the licenses it needs to export to the US and for you to import. Keep in mind that it's not only the filing that can be affected by these compliances, the amount you owe in a bond might be affected as well. So for example, when the amount of a single entry bond is calculated for goods with FDA approval, the value of the goods is actually tripled to calculate the single bond entry amount. So if you're shipping something that's subject to compliance from the FDA, even if you're only shipping one time, that's a case where it might actually be worth it for you to purchase a continuous bond, since the cost of a single entry bond might be very high. Another detail to take into account: intellectual property rights. So if you're importing anything with some kind of trademark or logo, make sure your supplier is licensed to make those items. For example, if you're making hats for a sports team, you need to make sure that your supplier is authorized to use this logo, because if they're not, then customs will seize your goods. And if that happens, you'll have to ship them back, or they'll have to be destroyed and you'll have to pay for it. So that's definitely a situation that you do not want to be in. Here's another detail to not overlook: labeling and packaging. Sometimes people think about labeling and packaging as an afterthought, but you're going to want to think about it very early on in the process, because labeling and packaging need to be done in a compliant manner. One thing to pay really close attention to is palletization. The US allows either plastic pallets or wood pallets that have been heat treated and have a fumigation certificate. If your supplier does not provide the fumigation certificate, your freight forwarder usually will, and they'll usually charge a fee for that, because this certificate is needed for entry. So make sure that you have all of the certification that you need for your packaging. Another thing to keep in mind is record keeping. After your goods clear customs, hold onto your documents for at least 5 years, and maybe even longer for goods subject to countervailing and anti-dumping duties, because customs can actually request them after the fact. If you don't have them, they might fine you, or they might suggest that your duties were higher than they actually were, and then tack on extra charges after the fact. Another reason to hold onto your records is so that you can compare between different shipments. For example, you might notice that your duties are higher than usual for one of your shipments. So check that to see if the HS code is the same one that was used as for previous shipments. You might have switched brokers, you might have had a different classification for some reason, and then in the future, you can talk to your broker and select the HS code that is best for you for future shipments. So these are some details that you'll want to keep in mind. Make sure not to overlook them, and make sure to ask questions. Your supplier and your broker will help you with these things, but it's important to know about these issues in advance so that you can ask about them, so that you can make sure that everything is in order.